Hello friends, welcome back once again, and thanks for joining me for another one of these video tastings. So this is an interesting one because Jason from Malt reached out to me and said, hey, would you like to do one of these to pair with a review that you've done on the site? So if you're coming here via the www.malt-review site, welcome. If you found this through other means, please go check out the full review of this whiskey on Malt Review. And there's actually an interesting interview accompanying this one with Jeff Quint, the guy who made the whiskey. So always fun to talk to people who had a hand in creating the product that we're enjoying. So what do we have today? This is something new and different. This is the Cedar Ridge American Single Malt Whiskey, and it's called the QuintEssential Signature Blend. And that's a little play on words. So as I said, Jeff Quint is the founder and master distiller or head distiller of Cedar Ridge, and so he is the guy behind this. And I had a chance to talk to him about this, which is a unique product. So maybe just a bit of background on Cedar Ridge. They're based in Iowa, which is, of course, the middle of U.S. corn country. I had tried a bunch of their whiskeys and thought they were good in terms of the raw materials, but the thing that was holding me back on each of them was that I thought they were a little underproofed. So they had been bottled at 80 proof. And to Cedar Ridge's credit, I think that myself and others had given them feedback on this. And so in September of last year, they had taken the step to increase the ABV to 43%, so 86 proof across the entire range. They also reached out to me after that. So Anna, their marketing manager, who thank you very much for this bottle. I should disclose this was sent to me free of charge by them. So Anna said, look, we've got this new expression coming out. We're really excited about it. Would you like to try it? And I said, sure. So here we are. So what do we have? This is American Single Malt Whiskey, which is a category that you don't see a lot of representation in. You've got a few of the craft distillers that have gotten into this. So Corsair recently reviewed a malt whiskey from them. Westland does malt whiskey. Balcones does some malt whiskey, and Woodford Reserve actually did a straight malt whiskey not too long ago. But there's really not a ton of these out there, so very much new territory in terms of what to think or expect about this. So, just an interesting sort of programming note. Whereas single malt is very clearly defined in terms of the law in Scotland, we actually don't have that in the U.S. And so there's been some funky stuff that's gone on. There was High West is an example of this, where they distilled a single malt at two distilleries that were 20 miles apart, and then they married the result and still called it single malt. But I think if you said to anybody in Scotland, look, this is a single malt from two different distilleries, 20 miles apart, but they're owned by the same person, they'd probably raise an eyebrow at you or worse. So just something to be aware of, and we'll think about the evolution of this category in terms of how do those definitions change and evolve over time. So there's no guessing required with this one though, and one of the nice things is I've just got the label tag around the neck here. They give you there's a little diagram there that we've actually gotten a digital copy of, and we've published alongside the review. But they give you a diagram of what's gone into making this whiskey. But I think just to put it in brief, you've got two separate distillations. There's a peated malt distillation, and then there's a two-row barley distillation. The two-row barley comes from Saskatchewan. The peated malt comes from Scotland. And then they mature these separately. Then there's an additional finishing that goes on with the two-row barley with some of the casks that have held the other produce of Cedar Ridge. So they do rum, they do fruit wines, they do a port-style wine, they do some brandies and things. And then that's an additional 1 to 2 years. And then these guys take a Solera process and marry these both and bottle out of that Solera. So without further ado, I'm going to get into tasting this and give you some thoughts, and then kind of try to help contextualize where does this sit within the world of whiskey more generally. So this is they're asking about $60 a bottle for this. I did not pay as I said, but this is from batch number 001. So I presume that's the first batch, but it's coming to us at 46% ABV, which is I think consistent with what you will see with a lot of the stuff coming out of Scotland. Particularly I think the flagship bottlings of the bigger brands often tend to be lower than that. You see them down 43% or 40%. So this gives you a nice little extra kicker on top of that. But you can see this color here. It's this very pale yellowish gold, but it's got this like a little rosy glint in it. It's pretty whiskey to look at. Forget the smelling or the tasting. It's just really nicely colored. But so immediately you've got a really expressive fruity note, or a winey note, I guess appropriately. It's Yeah, you got a whole orchard full of fruit in there. There's apples, there's pears, there's really really juicy grapes, really juicy green grapes. I'm almost getting like if you think about like trying to put this in wine terms, it's almost like a really fruity Sauvignon Blanc or something. But there's more there. It's not just this is not just like a sweet fruit bomb. I'm getting all sorts of spices. Like I'm getting ground cardamom pods in here. There's an interesting note of eucalyptus that's been consistent across the couple times that I've tasted this. That kind of medicinal herbaceous note of eucalyptus. And there's a it's funny when I was talking to Jeff. So his family has a history in the German winemaking region in the Mosel there, and he was talking about how seriously they take schnapps versus for us it's kind of like this throwaway sugary beverages. But I'm getting like a brandied cherry note on there. One of the things that Jeff had highlighted with this was trying to make sure that the peat was well integrated, that it wasn't. He didn't want it to be a peat bomb, and he wanted that part to be a note in there, but in a context of a broader whole. And I think he's achieved that well. I don't get smoky so much as I would describe as like roasty. But yeah, no, like the waterfruit I recently reviewed, there's a lot of raw material in here. There's a lot of barley in here, and I love that. I think that is the hallmark of somebody that takes their raw materials seriously, shows them the due respect, is cares about the grain and doesn't just see it in terms of output and yield and economics and things. So that's really nice. So it's a promising nose. Gonna see how it tastes. As you know, I like to just kind of have a little kiss of that and just really not even just to kind of acclimatize the front of the mouth there. Okay, getting like a little preview here, but of course I've spilled it all over myself now that I'm trying to demonstrate to everybody the correct whiskey tasting procedure. So forgive me, but okay. So that was kind of a warm up sip, and I know a lot of people do this. They talk about not even paying attention to the first sip, just using it as really kind of palate coating or calibrating. And so I'm going to do this for real this time and let you guys know what I taste. So yeah, it's very subtle to start, and you guys know that I don't typically get a whole ton on the front of the mouth, but I think in the review I talked about black tea, which is that sort of that watery but herbal, and then as you get in the middle of the palate, it blooms momentarily with this woody note, but then it gets a little bit thin, but then I think it really improves towards the back of the mouth. So. Yeah, so that tastes lovely at the back of the mouth. You've got a nice balance of wood, malt, citrus flavors. There's you're getting it doesn't come across immediately, but lingering notes of that like that brandied cherry I talked about, or that roasty, almost like a mocha or an espresso note. I think like in comparison to the other Cedar Ridge whiskeys that I've tasted, I think this really benefits from a higher strength. I think you've got the other ones felt a little bit like they were trying to shout through this waterfall in terms of the underlying flavors just being so dilute. And this is so much better in terms of flavor and texture. So congrats to them for doing it the right way on this one. Yeah, just consistent, and again, like the Waterford, throughout the mouth, you've from the beginning to the end, you've got all these flavors swirling around, but there's always this consistent note of the barley and the grain, and that's again what I'm really interested in, because there's so much emphasis placed, particularly in the Scotch whiskey industry, on cask, and you get these statements that X% of the flavor comes from the cask or comes from the barrel, and to see somebody really going back to basics and really being able to get a lot of that intrinsic flavor from the malted barley in there is great. So talking to Jeff, it was interesting. I said to him, like, where do you want me to put this in terms of like the hierarchy? Like, is this an American whiskey meant to compete with bourbon, or is it a malt whiskey meant to compete with the global malt whiskey competitive set, which includes obviously Scotland, but also places like Japan and even down in Australia and elsewhere. And he said, I want this to be a world whiskey or a world malt whiskey. He said, and that includes Scotland. Like I want to put this head to head with Scotch, and it's interesting. I can show you the bottle. It looks more like a Scotch whiskey bottle than a bourbon bottle in terms of the shape and in terms of like the label there. Um, it is. It is coming in come packaged in a tube, which is more characteristic, at least in my experience of Scotch. And so they're really positioning it to say, like, look, this is a malt whiskey, and if you had to put it somewhere, put it in the section with the Scotch whiskey. So, um, what do I think of this in those terms? So I was thinking about, okay, so $60 MSRP. What does that get me? It gets me really kind of the entry level, or maybe one step above on most of the Scotch whiskeys. So you talk about your Dalmore 12-year-old, Glenfiddich 15-year-old, Glenrothes 12-year-old, Highland Park 12-year-old. And these are, if you're an experienced whiskey taster, these are names and numbers that are probably not inspiring like a ton of enthusiasm for you. At least for me, the mega malts and the particularly the lower end of the range is often pretty uninspired stuff. And this by contrast is really nice. I mean, it's mm, you don't have that huge age statement on it. I mean, I think just looking at their diagram here, you've got the youngest of this stuff is probably 2 to 3 years old. So, but again, we're in the United States. It's a lot hotter. The maturation is going to occur more quickly. But I don't think it suffers at all from being a little bit younger. And this is mm, it's great. It's really tasty. It goes down very quick. It's got unique flavors. I think again, I love that there's the integrity of the raw materials. I love that they've done some interesting stuff in terms of incorporating a peated malt and really trying their hand at blending and using that Solera to good effect. Because I think what you get is a very complete whiskey at the end of all of it. So. I liked this a lot. I scored it a 7 out of 10, which, if you know the malt scoring system, is a very positive score, and I wanted that to reflect that. Like, I would really, if all American malt whiskey came out like this, I'd be very happy with the evolution of that category. I think that these guys have set the bar extremely high in terms of just what they've been able to achieve, and I'd like to put this in front of some let's call them partisan Scotch whiskey drinkers, and put that in a lineup of other, again, comparably priced Scottish single malt whiskey, and see did people prefer this? And I have a strong feeling that they might. So. Mm. Again, thanks to Sea Ridge for sending this bottle through. I'm going to hopefully be able to distribute the rest to friends via samples and let more people taste this. But for now, I'm happy to have had it, and happy to have had a favorable impression of it, because it's really nice stuff. So hopefully you enjoyed this, and this added a little bit something to the rather dry words on the page. So please let me know what you think. Leave a comment, and I'm always happy to hear feedback and constructive criticism about this stuff. But in the meantime, it's been fun as always to sit down with you and just kind of enjoy a bit of whiskey for a few minutes, which is what we're all here for. So, cheers.